welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Doug Hepburn with Hepburn Financial Advisors in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. I'm your host for today, and I'm also an investment advisor representative of and offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisors, LLC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Cetera is separately owned from any other entity. I'd like to introduce my co-host today, Ken Jordan of Round Point Mortgage. Ken, tell me something good in your world.
I'll tell you something even better. So we're at Princeton Mortgage now, not Round Point.
Oh, my apologies.
No
My
sweat.
apologies.
No,
That's right. That is better, isn't it?
Yeah, we just made a switch from Round Point to Princeton. We're very excited about the opportunities that our new company offers. The trajectory of the company is phenomenal. The culture, the direction, the product offering, everything has just been fantastic. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's awesome. Moving on up.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. Well, we've had some pretty interesting stuff happen over the last month or two.
We sure have.
What are you seeing in the mortgage markets?
Well, I'll tell you, right. So when was the last time we chatted? It was probably back before the summer. And,
right.
I don't know that things have gotten any better in the mortgage market since then. We did see a little reprieve, but June was no fun. The end of August was about the same, and going into September, I mean, we saw the inflation numbers yesterday, and I know that, this is a taped show. So somewhat, relevant information is that inflation is still an issue. And as long as inflation is still an issue, the Federal Reserve is going to continue to do what it has to do by increasing the federal funds rate. And right now that seems to be having an impact on the market overall. And we're seeing a pretty sizable uptick in mortgage rates from close to 4% at the beginning of the year. Here we are in September, and we're inching over 6%. So we're continuing to see those increases and that upward pressure, on the interest rates.
Right. Yeah, the Fed really has its work cut out for it, in terms of trying to tame inflation at this point.
Yeah.
And the real question is, how deep is it going to get into the economy? Obviously, by raising short-term rates, they slow the economy down, and it's created a lot of fear, in particularly in the media, that we're seeing yield curve inversion.
Yeah.
Where short-term rates, 2-year rates, are going above 10-year rates. You can borrow for less longer than you can short-term. Well, I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that the Federal Reserve has really been the 800-pound gorilla in the markets, and kind of distorted the yield curve, if you will, because obviously long-term rates should be higher than short-term rates.
Well, I think it's interesting, Doug, is that you're right. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and it seems to be tiptoeing on marshmallows, because I think that if they would just, had they just done what they needed to do, the Fed in leading up to this, I think maybe things may have been different. And look, I'm no expert. We all kind of follow this stuff, but now we're in a position. We know that the short-term interest rates and their ability to quell, growth and inflation, there's a lead time there. You know what I mean? And the question is,
exactly,
it's going to be interesting. Are they going to be able to time it correctly to know when to bring the rate back down before you start to see the actual numbers when it comes to unemployment and things like that, to prove that it's working? And, Powell's got his work. He's got his work cut out for him. I'm just not thrilled with his track record.
Right. I mean, anytime you make changes like that to the economy, it's sort of like turning an aircraft carrier or an ocean liner. I mean, you've got to plan for, a 2-mile radius, if you will, just to go 90 to 180 degrees. And so, we're probably going to continue to see volatility in the markets and changes in interest rates going forward.
Sure.
I noticed recently some headlines indicating that the increase in interest rates has actually caused a drop in the number of housing sales. and transactions on a year-over-year basis. In fact, some local counties have seen it around here a lot more than say the inner city like Philadelphia. Are you seeing that as well?
Well, here's what I'm definitely seeing. Year over year, applications for mortgages have dropped substantially. It was a $4 trillion industry last year. Now we're looking at about $1.9 trillion industry, and they're expecting it to be $1.5 trillion through 2023. So mortgage originations are off big time. I think we are seeing a dip in home sales, but I still believe that that's primarily driven by inventory, not by the lack of buyers. I think that if you look at the number of people who have been pre-approved, there's just from my experience over the last 90 days, there is a population of people out there that would buy if they just had an opportunity to, let's say, get some seller's assist. Right? Cash is the biggest barrier to entry right now in the real estate market. So what I think is interesting is we're starting to see sales dip a little bit. Again, I still think it's primarily supply driven, but the people that are decreasing their sale price, meaning you put the house on the market, you don't get an offer in 6 weeks, and all of a sudden you're going to lower the price. I find it odd that the industry hasn't adjusted to the fact that they can keep the price the same. Let the world know that there's a seller assist available, and you might get an influx of people who are just short on cash,
By seller assist, do you mean like the seller taking back a portion of the mortgage, or the seller?
Good question. It's a seller covering a portion of the closing costs for the buyer. Buyers sometimes may have the 3.5% down. They may have the 5% down that they need to get a mortgage, but they don't have the money for the closing costs. Well, sometimes if the seller would pay the closing costs, it's cheaper than dropping your sale price $15,000 or a portion of the closing costs. And now you create buyers where there otherwise wouldn't be any. And I think there's a disconnect there in the marketplace, and I think that if we can close that knowledge gap, I think that you could see a more of an equilibrium where it's okay. Now you have buyers that can afford to come into the market and buy because cash is the barrier has been reduced a little bit, and you got sellers who are still getting top dollar.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we'll have to dive into that a little bit more next time, and hopefully things will change over the next month. But interestingly enough, we got a question from one of our viewers, Richard Apple from Philadelphia, asks, "How are interest rates affecting the housing market?"
I just had a conversation with a top real estate agent in our marketplace today, and his experience with the market right now when it comes to interest rates is the buyers are a little bit spooked. The buyers who are interest rate sensitive are a little bit spooked, and what they're seeing is that they're pulling back from their home search because they think potentially that they can't afford that property anymore. But again, I feel like it's a communication, it's a knowledge gap where you look at the fact that maybe you're paying an interest rate that's 0.75% higher than when you got pre-approved, Richard. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen to that sale price? Is it going to come down? Well, if the sale price comes down, chances are that there's a good indication that interest rates may come down with it, and you could refinance that interest rate, at a future date. But if the sale prices don't come down, if they continue to go up, and historically, obviously, real estate goes up. It never goes up forever, but it goes up. And the bottom line is that yes, it is starting to work its way into the psyche of the buying population, but the deck is always stacked in favor of owning real estate. So, for those that are listening, it's still a good idea to get out there and buy.
And that's a great point. I mean, people have become so accustomed to these rock bottom rates that they think, oh gosh, the 30-year mortgage is over 3%. I can't afford a house. I can remember when you and I were, before we were able to buy houses, interest rates, or who knows, maybe when we were in college, interest rates were double digits, 15, 18%, and people were still buying houses. So, I think, relatively speaking, interest rates are still very, very low.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, if you have a question for Money Matters TV, here's how you can get your question answered.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Well, regardless of what you do, whether you're an executive, a business owner, an entrepreneur, it always helps to have somebody else to go to bounce ideas off of, be a sounding board, and help you be your most productive. And that's where success coaches really come into play. Our guest today is Clement Pepe, who has been a success coach for a number of years, and has a long history of helping business owners and individuals to succeed. He is a present founder and past president of Laguna Hills Chamber of Commerce, member of the South Orange Chamber of Commerce for a number of years, and is a member and distinguished Toastmaster of Toastmasters International. Welcome, Clement.
Thank you, Doug. It's good to be here. 31 years, actually. Coming up on 31 years I've been a coach.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Tell me, what if I'm successful, what do I need a coach for?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think anybody needs a coach. I think it's a good idea to have one. The thing about it is success is based on where you are at that moment, really. And sometimes we don't see what's possible based on some of the information we gather over the years and so on. So when a person comes to me as a coach, and again, I've been doing this almost 31 years now. When they come to me, they come in at a ground zero, if you will. And some person's ground zero may be higher than another ground zero. But with what they learn from a coach, me personally, I don't know what the other coaches are doing, but for me personally, they are able to then move that ground zero up. And it's based on really, there's three aspects of life. There's what we know, there's what we don't know. So what we know, and we were able to do it. What we don't know, we have two choices. We can decide not to know it, and we just don't know it, or we can say, I want to know that, and we'll learn it, and then we will know it. But the key element of what success coaching does is it handles that third spot, which is called, I don't know that I don't know. So if I don't know that I don't know something, how am I going to look for it? How am I going to find it? So success coaching really is getting in touch with what you don't know. You don't know. And there's a lot of segments of the coaching, and we can get into that as we go along, that will help people get there. But I've had people that have come in as a millionaire and people who have come in and had very little money. And it's interesting too, because, in my coaching, it's usually people come to me to make more money. That's usually the first leg of it. But for me, making more money is not success. Success is being balanced. So if you got a whole bunch of money and don't have a good relationship, that's not success. Or you can have a good relationship and not a whole bunch of money. That's not success. So balance is the key. So that's why people who are successful keep coming.
And that's a great point, because you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have time because you're spending it doing other things that are not valuable to you, you're not going to be happy. And so that's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that it's not just about money. It's about life.
Mm-hmm.
Clement, a question for you. First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
So All right. So the knock on coaching a lot of times is that, you think it's this like touchy feely, make you feel good, person. And it's hard to quantify the success. It's hard to quantify the progress a lot of times. And that they're like a quasi therapist, right? So what is the difference between a coach and a therapist?
Good question. A therapist, for me, and again, I'm giving you my opinions here. I'm not saying that, okay, this is the end all. You hear here, this is it. These are my opinions. This is 77. I'll be 77 in about 12 days from now. So I've been around for a while, so I have a lot of opinions. But my thought on therapy as opposed to coaching, therapy deals a lot with the past, a lot with what happened and what you did and what you didn't do and what your parents did and didn't do. A lot of stuff in the past. Where coaching really is about the present moment. It's about what are you doing now with what you got and what are you going to do with that in your future? What are your goals? What do you want to attain? In all those areas that we were just talking about, not just financially, but those things that are important to you, perhaps your relationship, your family, your income, your career, your spiritual walk, your health and fitness, your material goals. So what do you want to create? And then start working toward that to create that. So for me, that's the difference. One is more about the past, the other coaching is more about the present and the future.
That's a really great point. As a financial advisor, I think we kind of get into similar roles, even though my role is really focused on finance. But in the long run, we all want our clients to feel successful, to be happy, to achieve those things that are going to make their life and time well spent. You know, what do you do to make your clients more successful?
Well, it's interesting because people have come. I started this practice back in. I started putting this coaching program together back in the middle 1980s, and my first client came to me in 1992. So I've been around for a long time. When I was started being a coach, there were no such thing as success coaches at that point. In fact, when I went into my first networking group meeting, they had to create a occupation for it because there was no such a thing. So
No, there's no SIC code for success coaching.
there may be now, but there wasn't back in 1992, right? So I like to call myself a pioneer in this thing. Now there were motivational speakers, there were people who were doing different things out there to train people and so on and so forth. But one-on-one coaching wasn't even it's for me it just became an idea and I just started putting it together. But what makes it different is for me is I help people in three different ways. One is I help them get underneath some of the things that are stopping them or slowing them down from having what they want in life, because we a lot of times know what to do. That Nike commercial, just do it. So we know what to do, but if we're just about just doing it, we'd all be gazillionaires, or we'd all have that rippled stomach that I think three people have, the rippled stomach. But so there's things that get in the way of our just doing it. So I help people get in touch with those things and then help them to change that so that they're not pulling them away from what they want now. And most of it is their internal dialogue, by the way. But it does help them to get to where they want to go. And then I teach them basically how to get the best out of themselves. I have a thought that if you buy a brand new car, brand new toaster oven, or brand new computer, you get a manual with it. And the manual tells you what to do, what not to do to be more effective. When we were born, human beings, we didn't get the manual on how to be a human being. And we were taught by people who didn't have the manual, who were taught by people who didn't have the manual. So we're out here kind of trying to figure this thing out. So
Making it up as we go along, right?
Yeah, exactly. And based on some inaccurate information, right? So what I do is teach people really how they operate. I've been always has been for me. Some people are interested in trains and cars and other things out there as a hobby. Mine's always been human being. How do we become more effective out there? How do we work this apparatus that we're born with and again, had no instructions on how to use? So part of the work I do with my clients is teach them how to utilize that mechanism called human being. And then I coach them in those areas, making sure their actions are lining up with what they say they want. When they're out, coaching back in. When they're out, coaching back in. And so that's how I'm able to really help people do what they do. And that's why some of my clients have been with me 27 years, 25 years, 20 years. And my initial coaching package is 6 months long. Right? So, but what they've done is they've seen value and then they got to the next level, etc.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So, right, you've been doing this a long time, but what makes a good coach? Can anyone be a coach?
I think the theory is that anyone can be a coach, but I think it's interesting too, because if you're going to be a coach, just like any other business, you've got to know three different things actually. So it's not just about coaching, because if you are the best coach in the world and you can't sell that coaching practice, you're not going to be successful. And if you can sell really well and you don't know how to coach, you're not going to be successful either. And the last part of it is your money management. If you're not doing your money accurate, by the way, this is any occupation. So if you could get an accountant, acupuncturist, a chiropractor, they could be the best in the world, but if they can't sell it, can't have people come to their practice, they're not going to be successful. So to just say, "Oh, I'm going to be a coach," it's just like almost saying, "Geez, I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player," and then just hoping that something will work out. So no, I don't think everybody could be a coach. If that was the case, everybody would.
It's funny, Clement. A lot of people they get focused on goals. As though the goal was like the finish line, and and it's true. I mean, it's good to have goals. It's good to set big ones, because if you can, it's better to set a big goal. I've heard it said it's better to set a big goal and fail than to set a little goal and achieve it. But oftentimes we set these goals, but once you achieve them, does it make sense to continue working with a coach?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because these goals that we talk about, and I believe it too. We should have a goal, because if we don't have a place to go, it's like taking a road trip and not having a destination. You won't know how to get there, and if you did get there, you wouldn't know it. So I think the goals are important, but I firmly believe that. If in fact, it's interesting. I always thought that if I could design a new society, I would give every child that was born a coach, someone that would take them from A to Z all the way through, and someone other than their parents, because they won't listen sometimes to their parents. But with that person giving that kind of instruction, and where their highest good is about that person, then when you join two people together, Napoleon Hill said it best in his book, Laws of Success, his first book that he ever wrote even before Think and Grow Rich. He called it the Mastermind Alliance. And where it says basically is that where two or more people come together working on the same goal, you enhance that goal. And whenever a person gets to a goal, they can't stop. It's almost like, oh, I'm done. We are goal-oriented machines, human beings. We're always going to want. It's not bad. It's not evil. It's just what human beings do. Now, the key is, and it's interesting, Doug, as you said it, it's like it isn't necessarily the goal. It's the process of getting to the goal. Because if we're not enjoying the process, the goal is not going to mean anything to us. So it's the process of it that is important. And a coach can always help you. Now, if I've been working on myself for a lot of years, by the way. And there's been times I have a coach and sometimes I haven't had a coach. I've always done better when I had a coach. Why? Because the mastermind principle says where two or more come together, We created a much higher power. The individual is powerful unto their own selves, and I'm powerful unto my own self. But when we bring those two powers together, working on the same thing, their goals, their life, the things they want to attain, now that power is immensely greater.
I could speak from experience that the attainment of the goal is one of the most fleeting emotions you'll ever experience. It's especially the bigger the goal, the bigger the accomplishment. It's euphoric for sure, but boy, it's a short experience, and that's where the next goal is born, and that's why people who run 5Ks look to run a half marathon. People run half marathons sometimes choose to run a full marathon because it's that next goal, and the joy is in the journey for sure. And I can relate to that. Let me ask you this, because I know that coaching now, like when you started in the mid '80s, back in your youth, what
I was 3. But
I figured that seems right if I'm doing the math. So how do you pick a coach now there are a lot of them. There's in every industry. There's industry specific coaches. There's general coaches. How do you choose? What criteria does someone go through to pick a coach?
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, I would look at the longevity of the person who's doing it. If they just lost their job and they decided to be a coach, I don't think that should be the person you choose. It may be, but I'm not sure if that's going to be successful for you. But I would have interviews of different people and ask some different questions and find out from people who have already worked with that coach what kind of results they have, what kind of information that you want to know from that person, because the coach will tell you that, most coaches are business people and most business people are salespeople. So they're going to sell you on wanting to use them as the coach. So, that if you say, oh God, you should use me because I'm the best. But if you're hearing it from somebody else, someone that coach has used or has worked with, then you got a lot better shot at being successful with that. And basically that's the key to anything really, is getting referrals from people who have already used this person. And that will give you that who to pick, if you will.
So it's not like you could just pick up a book and use that instead of getting a coach, right?
Well, if that was the case, I like to talk about, there's books out there, how to be a millionaire, how to be the best salesperson in the world. And, so if you just go buy the book, then you probably would just be the best salesperson in the world. And, but
we have to read it first, right?
Well, not only read it, but you have to utilize all that's in that book. The coaching, and I'm not saying don't read books, whatever, but get a coach to help you implement what you learned in the book.
That's great stuff.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on within human being that gets us in the way, or gets in the way of our doing what we know we need to do to have what we say we want to have. There's a great line, I don't know who said it, but we've seen the enemy, and the enemy is us. And so that happens with human beings. So you can read all the books in the world you want, but again, I would recommend, and when you're done with that book, grab a coach and say, okay, I learned this, I want to do this, let's go. And, and by the way, you picked the right, what's that?
This is valuable stuff, Clement, but unfortunately we got to wrap up. I think
no, I'm a Toastmaster. We don't ever wrap up.
But we got a hard close here. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Clement, for your input today on coaching, and would like to let everybody know and thank you for helping us out today. Ken, our next week's guest is going to be Mark Downer of Action Information. So please tune in for our next episode of Money Matters TV, where your money matters.